All right. Welcome to the second episode of the Parenting Together podcast. I'm your host, Ryan Hanley, and I'm joined here again by David and by Tony. And this week, we're introducing a new voice to the podcast, Ruth Pingle. Ruth is married to our lead elder, Jeremy, here at Life Church. She is a mother to 4 children. She is a help to countless other parents, including me and my wife. She speaks into our lives very frequently. And we're excited to have her and mix her voice in here. Now, last week when we were together, we kind of introduced the idea of the theme of the podcast, the idea of parenting together. That's really a core principle for us here at Life Church, is that we believe parenting is a calling for each of us, but it is also a calling for us corporately to bring our kids into. This week, we're going to have a little bit more of a specific focus with the nature of the questions we're pulling. As always, these aren't intended to be the totality or the perfect answer to these questions. But if you do have questions from what we've said, the plus is you know most of the people. If you're listening to this, you know David, Tony, and Ruth. And you can reach out and ask questions. So let's jump in. The first question, and I'll throw it to you first, Tony, is how do we navigate kids and adults in our church family that we don't fully trust? Protecting our kids without dishonoring other people?
Yeah, it's a really good question from the perspective of if you're a church that's growing and missional and you're reaching out to other people getting saved, coming into your church, and you have families and kids, you don't know their family values yet. You know, they may be, if they're just saved, they're developing maybe new family values from what they used to be when they were not saved. And their kids may be in a variety of places in their life at this point, depending on whether they're younger or older and things like that. So I would say, first off, it takes a lot of wisdom, a lot of wisdom in terms of God guiding us to help us in that situation, because we do not want to run off people that are babes in Christ while we're trying to work with them and try to understand where they're at. I mean, the goal, I would say on the front end many times, is to understand where the parents are at and what their family values are, so that we can help them in that situation. In that process of doing that, the kids may be in a variety of places, and safety is a big issue. We should never take a chance on the safety of our children while we're working through these situations. We should not have to. I mean, my wife and I lived in a intentional community for a period of years, and there were a lot of people who lived there who were working with kids that were in really hard situations, and there were some parents that were also in hard places. And so we asked ourselves, how would we live on the mission field if we went to another country and had to raise our kids there? What things would we do? So let me just put that out there as a start, and somebody else can jump into it. There's some things, a lot of wisdom, discernment in the midst of this, but safety should be a big issue to watch over our kids. We don't want to put our kids in a dangerous situation.
Well, I think this question has a broad answer, and then I think it has some specifics to get into. If we're talking about just in general, kids and adults that we don't trust on a Sunday morning, say, then if you don't trust them, you don't have to have your kids around them. Just avoid them. If we're talking about, your child wants to go to a friend's house and you don't trust the parents, then I think, we've talked, at length before about ways to handle that. If we're talking about, we think that there is someone serving in the nursery or in a children's church, and we don't trust them, I think that is an issue, actually, where you have to ask yourself, do I trust the people in charge of the nursery? Do I trust the people in charge of the childcare situation? And if you do, then you can go to that person and say, hey, I've got questions about, so-and-so serving there. There may be information you don't know about that person can enlighten you with that would alleviate your fears. You may also be bringing up something that the person in charge is not aware of and needs to be made aware of. But either way, without having that conversation, you're at an impasse with that. I think, too, it's important to realize that there are places where people, scratch that out, edit. Stop. Done.
Your thoughts, David?
I think some of it all fits what Ruth said, what fits what Tony said, but I also think in addition to that, some of that is how willing you are to get to know those people.
Yes.
And how willing you are to open up your home. It's going to take an investment. You don't want to put your kids with people that you don't trust, but you may not know to trust them until you spend some time with them. And then you may find out,
That's right.
oh, they'd have similar values to that. It just didn't look like it in that moment. And then you may find others that you go, man, they don't have the same values. I either need to help them and they're somebody that I should pour into, or they're somebody that I need to let somebody else do that because my kids aren't ready for that and what their kids are exposed to and doing and being a part of. So there's a lot of filtering you have to do, and you do have to have a lot of wisdom. I think, though, in addition to that, you really have to be open to what God's asking you to do. Because sometimes you are having to reach out. If somebody's new in the church, their kids aren't going to be perfect.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
You got to be talking to your kids about how they need to act when Johnny comes to your house, because they're new in the church and they haven't been raised that way. So, son, this is what I want you to model for our friends coming over.
Mm-hmm.
This is how you get to help in this moment while they're in our environment that's safe. So there's a lot to that. And I think Ruth's right. It's a pretty broad question, has lots of things.
Mm-hmm.
If you are somebody in the church and you're seeing somebody in an area and you have a question, if you don't feel comfortable asking the person over that area, you should at minimum come to the leaders.
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
And you should bring it to the leaders and say, hey, I'm concerned about this person serving over here with these kids, or I'm concerned about my kids working in this area with this person. It would be wrong of us to hold that in and not ask, because you might see something that got missed by somebody else. But if nothing else, at least we're shutting the enemy out of us thinking wrong about different people.
If I can ask just a follow-up in terms of, this is a great place. I know there's some questions coming along. This is a great place for you to start the process of preparing your kids to interface with other people outside of your family, or that are new in the church. They may represent something different. We always want to be missional in our outlook as a church and families. And it's like, there's always this question, well, how do I prepare my kids for that? Well, this is a good place because it's real safe. They're coming to your house and you're watching stuff and you're trying to invite the parents over and build some relationships there. This is a way that you become an example to your children, to how we do some mission type stuff. We're reaching out to people that maybe are new, we don't really know them, and it's a safe place to do it in. So,
Yeah, I think again the thing that pops into my mind when I'm hearing all of this, this is a key issue of why we would say be plugged into a life group.
Absolutely.
Have your kids in that environment, right? That's a pretty safe environment where you guys are all together, and we should be looking to, especially as we have new people coming into the church, them getting roped into a life group. So if you're not a part of one, it's going to make it pretty difficult for you to get your kids in this scenario. So join a life group.
Ew.
Yep.
There's your Paul Shipman plug for the week. He didn't pay me to do that. Here's a question I would ask, maybe just as a follow-up to that for you guys, though, is if you're in a situation where you know that you can't trust your kid to go over to another person's house, to little Johnny's house, to use David's example, what are some of the ways that you talk to your kids about that and explain that? So you're not overexposing another family, but you're still keeping that level of trust with your child.
I could start. The first thing that comes to mind is, may not answer this question directly. Parents have a responsibility to help their kids navigate their friendships.
Right.
They don't just choose their friendships. We help choose their friends for them. And so in that, sometimes I've talked to my kids, depending on their age, I've talked to my kids about, you know what, when you and such are around one another, you don't do so well. It's not that either of you are bad. You just don't do well together. And so for right now in this season, let's focus on these friends and maybe not over here in this place. You don't have to tear the people down or the kids down that you don't want your kids, but you direct them towards where you want them to go. And that'll help them choose those friends.
Right.
Our kids were always pretty easy. They didn't ask a lot of questions about that. We had other people come over to our house when we were in that situation, and it's like kids, and it's like our kids were always happy with it's like, can we go over to such and such a house? It's like, no, we'll ask the parents to let their child come over, and they were like fine with that, and they were happy about it. So it maybe depend on the age in terms of how curious the kids get, but our children's age at that point, they were fine with us saying, no, we'll contact the parents and their kids can come over, and our kids were just happy to have somebody to play with, in that situation. So
I do think age is a big deal.
Sure. Mm-hmm.
If your kids are little, they don't need to have any understanding at all of what is going on that would prevent you from letting them go be with somebody else. But I think there's great value as they get older in appropriately talking to them about why. To say, well, do you know what happens with it? Have you seen their mom and dad interact with each other? You have told me you were scared about that before. This is not a way that we would behave. And so why, to put you over in that situation, we're just going to keep you over here. Let them come to our house. I think that there are things that you can do like that without having to go on a big rant or make everything, to downplay another family, but still teach your children like the sensations that you're having where you're like, this feels kind of dangerous or this feels kind of off, to say, yeah, you're actually seeing that right. Yeah. I'm not going to elaborate on that, much more than that depending on their age, but to say, yeah, that's right. And so we're just going to keep you safe and keep you here. Yeah. But it definitely, as your kids get older, then there becomes more of and they can judge it for themselves, because if, the thing about counterfeit, where if you want to determine a counterfeit bill, you don't study all the different ways to counterfeit it. You study the real thing. Hopefully you have the real thing in your home. And as your kids grow up in that, they define what healthy relationships are based on your family. Well, they can see it then in other places. It's not desirable for them to go, be there. And so then you can have conversations with them, helping them be able to make those decisions themselves.
One of the things that we did also, others did that too, I'm sure, but it was like, we always asked our children when they came back home, or after they've been around other kids, it's like, how did that go? And we don't do leading questions that would lead them in a wrong way or bring suspicions up, but you can ask questions that they might say something like, well, I really felt uncomfortable about blah, 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 It's like, to me, that's a parent responsibility. You have the responsibility not just to have your children interact with other children, you should ask your children afterwards, how did that go?
Absolutely.
It's like something that went on and things like that. So,
yeah.
Completely.
Well, we could spend probably a whole podcast on this question alone. There are a few others, but what I'm taking away from this is, you need to have good established communication with your child.
Yes.
There needs to be lots and lots of conversation. And then also the undertone I'm hearing is, if it comes down to issues of comfort, you're the one who sacrifices for your child to have those friendships. Those kids come to your house. I'm sure we could have gotten into areas like sports. If your kid wants to go out in sports and you don't fully trust the situation, go out and volunteer to coach. Go sit on the sideline of the practices. It's on us as parents to be sacrificial for our children while keeping them covered. So, but to keep this moving along, and this flows into this conversation, this was one submitted from the parents gathering. It says, how does only put your kids with people you have relationship with apply to school and daycare? Now, I know you guys all have thoughts on this, so I'm going to start with Ruth and ask, what do you think?
Well, my initial thought is, where did that phrase come from, to only put your kids with people you have relationship with? Because that's a new concept to me. I've not heard that preached in that way or give the advice given in that way. I think it is wise to be able to trust the situations that your kids are in. And I think ultimately we do want our kids to be with people that we have relationship with. But that really is on us.
Right.
So if I have my child in a school somewhere, if I have my child in a daycare somewhere, it's on me then to go have relationship with the teachers, with the people that are involved in their lives. Why would I not want to pursue that? And I know it's easier in a church setting because theoretically we all are going to be believing the same thing and under the same umbrella of authority. It would be harder in a secular situation or even in maybe a Christian school where it's not just a church school, where there are many other, churches coming together and there could be differing views about things. But I think regardless, if this is what you believe, that you can only have your kids with people you have relationship with, then I say that's on you as the parent to go make sure you have relationship with them.
I like that. I also like, this is a complete sidetrack and subject to being edited out. So throw that caveat out every time I open my mouth. I love that idea because it's not that even for us, so if we're looking locally, why we established our school, it's not we established our school and then came up with, this is how we parent together. It's we believe deeply in parenting together. What's the best way for us to do that? Oh, if we all put our kids in a school together and we know each other and we can communicate, there's input that way. Yeah. It's not the other way around that we have the school so we parent together. It's we have a biblical mandate to parent together. The church school isn't necessarily a biblical mandate. It's a prophetic mandate on our house to have this so that we can do this. Yeah. So that's a sidetrack. We're not doing a podcast on the school here, but David, you're over both our school and our daycare. So I'm curious what your take on this question would be.
I think mine would be similar to Ruth's. I think it's the parent's responsibility. If you're going to put your kids somewhere, when we had our kids in a school that for a season that was a Christian school, but not necessarily like what we built here, we got to know the teachers. Mm-hmm. We went and spent time with them. We invited them to our home to have dinner. Mm-hmm. We wanted to know them so we could trust them. And if there were bumps there or issues there, we also looked to who was leading it. Mm-hmm. Because I wanted a relationship with who was leading it so that I could appeal if I needed to, or so that I could trust the decisions they were making in the midst of that. Mm-hmm. So I leaned into, okay, it's my job. It's Jody and I's job to go after what we want to. And if we want to see something different in the school, or we want to see something different in the daycare where our kids were at, by getting and building those relationships, that gave us a bridge to bring ideas. Mm-hmm. This could improve here, but I'm not doing it as, this could improve here. I'm doing it as, hey, we're building together. You're caring for my kid. What do you think of this idea? Mm-hmm. And we've built enough relationship then to work it.
Yeah, Tony, I wanted to throw this to you at a specific angle. I know you think a lot and teach a lot on spiritual authority in our local context, right? So if we're looking at our church, we have our school, we have our daycare back here. You might not be best friends with every teacher in the school or know everybody in the daycare, but can you talk about how spiritual authority and trusting delegated authority factors into this conversation for us specifically?
Yeah, well, from the perspective of if I had a little child to put in the fun factory, for instance, and I didn't know the teachers that were in there, we talked about we should get to know them. I understand that, but on the front end, maybe I don't. Mm-hmm. Yeah. But I know who's over the fun factory, which is David. Right. And so I respect and I understand that this is a person who's not going to put just anybody in there with my children. Right. So this is where delegated authority works. It's like, so when you put them in, it's like, do you trust the person who's the authority over the area, even over the teachers or whatever it might be? Right. And it's like, that's a first consideration before building the relationship with the teacher or whatever else. It's like, oh yeah, David's not going to have that. I know David. It's like, no, he's going to be very careful in terms of this situation. So on the front end, even if I don't know the fun factory worker who's watching my little child, I know the person who's over the fun factory. Yes. And it's like, you know what, it's going to be okay. It's like delegated authority does work that way. Yeah. He has the same values that I have in terms of things. And so that's an important aspect.
Yeah. I will say too, on that point, if this is a point of struggle for you as a parent, where, if this question is coming from a place of, well, I don't trust the people in the school or in the daycare, it may actually be revealing in your heart an underlying questioning or mistrust of leadership at that governmental level.
Sure.
And so I don't, without knowing who asked this question, I would say maybe look inward at yourself
Sure.
and say, am I asking this question because I actually don't trust the governmental authority? Because that's something that we would want, like that you should want to know about yourself,
Right.
because that's either a place of disagreement where you have to decide, oh, okay, well, maybe there's an unreconcilable disagreement here, or where you could say, oh, maybe I just need to relax and trust and let some of that go.
Yeah.
And that would be the right thing to do too.
Right. Well, I mean, if you're thinking about trust, right, and there's nothing more precious to us than our kids.
That's right.
That we're entrusting to people. So on the one hand, I would be sympathetic towards those worries and concerns. At the same point, if we just harbor those in our heart, like you're saying, that can become and just sow distrust in us. One thing that I think, and this is something that David is great about, which is helpful because this is obviously the area we're talking about, but questions does not equal distrust.
Right.
If you need to ask questions so that you can just put those things to bed, I know the guys who are running the school, our church, all these areas, they would love to entertain those questions and have the conversation. And if there's things to work through in the midst of that, there's things to work through. I've found more often, though, I ask the question, especially if I don't ask it accusatorily, and then I find, oh, well, they're thinking about it the same way I am. Oh, they have their eyes on that.
Mm-hmm.
That's a little different than what I thought, but I understand where they're coming from. And it just helps to build and foster that. So again, please, questions.
So it's also good to be transparent on these things. Sometimes you run across a situation where somebody's like, that's a problem I have a little bit in terms of trusting situations.
Sure.
And it's like, so why do you have that? And it's like, well, in another situation I was in, leadership did this.
Yeah.
It's like, well, okay, that helps me to understand why you're a little more skeptical.
Yeah.
It's like, that's fine. Well, let us walk through this. It's like, trust is built, and it's like, we're going to prove that we're trustworthy and that it's like, we're not like whatever that situation was that you had kind of issue. And you can ask questions here. Yeah. We're not one of those things that's like believe us or else kind of issue. It's like you can talk through it. So
all of this comes back to what we said at the beginning, Ryan, about how we wanted to raise our kids together. Mm-hmm. And these questions are questions that have potential to divide things out. I don't trust this person. I have questions about that person. But if we will if we will do what we say we want to do, which is raise our kids together, and if we will let these questions actually draw us closer to each other in conversation rather than harboring them in silence, then we will work through these issues. The only way we don't get through these issues is if we stop the conversation,
right,
or if we keep things to ourselves, or if we go outside and find another source of information, which that is an option, but it is an option that takes you out of the relational life that we are desiring to live together.
This is really, this is how we get to know each other better.
Yes.
Yeah.
This is like a process, and like, if we want to be closer and build together and know each other's hearts and raise our kids, we have to work through a process.
Yes.
This is like human life, right?
Yes.
We're not all coming from the same place. We all do have some differences about some things. It's like that struggle, but believing the best or wanting to work through it or asking the questions or let's talk about it or this is why I react that way. This is the process that makes us come together and be of one heart and mind. So
it would be so nice if real relationships were forged without fire and you could just go on vacation together and have pleasant dinners together, and that's the place that really cemented things. But where you really get to know somebody is when there's a problem.
Right.
And instead of walking away from each other, you vow instead to work through it together. Right. That's where real relationships are formed.
Yep.
So when I'm hearing these, I think of, like the phrase, like, these are the problems of a missional church. If this is what we're building and there's growth and there's things like this, even the fun factory, the idea of this is missional. Like, we want to be reaching out into our community, serving our community. This next question, I want to just spend just a minute framing it. The question is, where's the line between mission and sheltering when choosing who your kids are around? I think both of these terms can end up being loaded and taken to the extreme in our definition. So I just want to give us a quick common definition that we're answering from. It will not cover the totality of everything, but I want to give it just common language, common definition as we're talking here. When we say that we want our kids to be missional, what that does not mean, it cannot look like I just send my kids off by themselves all the time and they're the ones being missional,
Right.
that I just throw them to the wolves and see what happens. If we're talking about what missional looks like, is we want them to have a kingdom mindset where they are thinking about, yes, I would like to see people saved and I want to be a part of that. That to me is the core of, if we want missional kids, are they asking that question? Who around me is not saved? What can I do to help them see Jesus?
Yeah.
That is what we want to foster, right?
Yeah.
If we're talking about sheltering to the extreme, right, that would be, well, if you just close up your doors and you don't let anybody interact with your kids and all they go is to 112 West Potter Avenue and then back, and you never have people over,
Hallelujah.
you never go out from Walmart. Right. Staying home does sound great to me, not going to lie. That would be the unhealthy. What is not unhealthy about sheltering is we do want to create an environment where our kids are protected,
Yes.
or incubated, if you will. Not that they're not developing and growing to function in the world, but we also don't want them to be overexposed to things that would be harmful to them. I know this question's framed around kids, but frankly, just as a side note, and we'll have a podcast about this later, the area where your kids are going to be most exposed really isn't the people they hang out with, it's what they do on their device.
That's true.
That is probably the biggest window of exposure that we have in the current age. So that's putting a pin in that. But just to reframe this question again, where's the line between mission and sheltering when choosing who your kids are around? And I was thinking, David, I'd give you first crack at answering this one.
I think the line comes, one, by their age, but two, by what you're doing as parents. Because the question comes back, not how do you help them be missional? The question is, are you being missional? And if you're being missional, how are you bringing your kids along with you
Very good.
in that process? Because they'll learn what it is to be missional by watching you be missional and how you include them in those processes. If you invite your neighbors over because you're trying to reach them because you've had the opportunity to meet them at the mailbox, your kids see that missional, and that's places for you to have conversations before they come, after they come, and you're teaching them what missional life looks like then, before you just say, hey, go storm the castle and win all those kids in the neighborhood that I don't pay attention to what you're doing with. And parents can do that, not meaning well, but that's not the best way. Your kids might bring a couple to church and might bring some, but man, it'd be a whole lot better if they learned it from you, through you.
Yeah.
Seems like this is like a process. It's like you start off when they're young and it's sheltering. And with the goal is you're moving toward being able that the child could be missional. And so it's a process along the way. It's like, so when does things start switching over from sheltering? It's like, well, it's by bits and pieces. It's not even age appropriate sometimes. It's maturity appropriate.
Sure.
Yeah.
Right.
You know, sometimes a person, one of your children could be ready to do something at age 8 and the next one's not till 12, you know, because they're not all the same and you raise them the same. So it's like, you have to know that as a parent. You have to know your child well. But it's a continual process. It's like there's safeguards to be built into it, realizing things such as, you know what, I have to watch who my kids hang out with, who becomes their best friends. One of the best predictors of success in life is having your child with somebody that has similar values and that loves God also. One of the best predictors of the fact that they will not do well is that they ended up with friends that were not good influences. It's the bad company corrupts good morals.
Right.
It's like your children they're not adults. Their brains are not fully formed. It's like, are they missional towards somebody else? It's like, well, they're learning how to even explain what they believe at earlier
right.
ages.
Yeah.
Sure.
So it's like adults can push them too fast in that direction. Like I say, it's a continuum. There's not a right speed for that. It's child dependent. And it depends on how good the parent is at this process. As David said, you know, if the parent's not very missional themselves,
Right.
then this could be a really slow process
Right.
because you can't push the kids out ahead of what you're capable of
exactly
doing
right.
yourself. So
Yeah.
I agree with everything that's been said here and have nothing further to add.
I think this one's if we're looking at opportunities, just things to throw out there, right? David has worked for the last several years really with the city on things like block parties that we do. If you want to talk about a missional opportunity where it can be you and your child, next time an email goes out to sign up for one of those things, don't protect your Sunday afternoon. Be out there, sign up, not just to man a station, but really the idea is we do want to be missional. And in North American churches, we are largely not well focused on local mission. I would say we always have room to grow in that. And this is the son of an evangelist talking for a minute here. There is always room for us to grow in this.
Yeah.
But I would agree with what you guys are saying is it has to come from us as parents. I have seen people go through our school and be missional. I've seen people go through our school and not be missional.
Yeah.
I've seen people not go through our school and be missional, and same the other way. And the predictor is, what are you doing? I went from this school from preschool on up. But my dad had me out with him when he was going to share the gospel with somebody. If he was going to bring a meal to somebody down in Devlin Place, he was bringing me along with him. I learned it through example. And we always say this, more is caught than taught, right? Yeah. That example it's got to be invaluable.
Yep,
so to that, and this will give you guys more room to jump off on that. This is our last question. How do we ensure our kids are missional by the time they're living their own lives? So I guess we're saying from the point of 18 and above, if we're going to call that own life, maybe graduation, what would be your goal by the time your kids are stepping out of your home? And I'll throw that one to Tony.
Well, I thought about this a lot when my children went off to college, which is like most of the time parents need to start thinking about this. Realizing that there was a high percentage of people who come from Christian homes whose kids go off to college who lose their faith. Yeah. I mean, like 70, 80%. And I was like, yeah, we're not going to have that. Yeah. And so it's like, what would change that percentage? How can we make sure that doesn't happen? And I think that a couple things. One is that we have a book called Shepherding Your Child's Heart. Is I think that by the time they're 18 and ready to leave your house, I hope that you as a parent still have your child's heart. Yeah. That they love you and respect you and want you in their life, and they're not just going off to college to get away from you. Yeah. Because that's going to be a problem. Yeah. And so we tried to develop a real close friendship with our children, where they trusted us and they loved us and wanted our input into their lives. And so when they went off to college, they couldn't wait to come back from classes to talk about what went on today. Yeah. And so we provided an atmosphere of like, well, yeah, you can talk about anything. We can talk about any subject here. You can ask any question now. I mean, you're out in the world. You're listening to people who do not have our values, but in fact they have the opposite of our values, and they will try to convince you that they're right and what you've always heard is wrong. And I was like, so we can talk about any of these things, and we did, and you can bring anybody home with you, and they did, and some interesting conversations there and things like that. So communication, make sure when your child leaves, it's like they're not just like, okay, I couldn't wait to be out of here. It's like, no, the tie is still, they're still your children. They still love you. And maybe you're moving from the direct influence you used to have authority-wise to influence, but they love your influence.
Yeah. I think this goes back to the parents. If you want your child to be living a missional life, but you are not living a missional life, you can say whatever you want, but what you live is the thing that they are going to live. And so if this question is coming from a place of fear of, oh, but if I have my kid sheltered in the church school or in the, then they're not going to be prepared for life outside. Whose job is it to prepare them? Right. It's your job to prepare them. Right. So if a value that you have is that you want them to be missional, what's that look like in your life? How are you missional? Bring your child into that. Show them, talk to them. If you have a conversation that is missional at work, come home. Tell that story around the dinner table. Talk about it with your child. Ask your child, where are you having missional conversations? Hey, listen, even if your kid is in our church school, they can be missional. Right. There are kids that need to hear the gospel in our church school. And they can reach out to people and be missional, even if they're even if they're with us. So I think it comes back, first of all, to how are you living your life? And unfortunately, or fortunately, for the good or for the bad, your kids do become a reflection of your life.
Sure.
And so if you're looking at your child, I mean, I know that there are kids that have gone through our school and then have gone into university and then said, well, I met someone who's homosexual and I realized I don't actually know how to talk to them about. Well, that's fine, because you're not done learning. You're not done being able to grow. Just because you've never faced that specific thing before, it doesn't mean you needed to be ready to do it before. But are you asking the questions now? Like Tony said, do you have the place with your child where they could come to you and ask you those questions? We've also had situations where kids have gone into university and then come back and said, so I'm realizing like other churches don't believe in the gifts of the Holy Spirit. And it's made me think, I don't even know if I believe in praying in tongues. Well, okay, that's great. You've never had to question that before. That's not necessarily a failure of parenting or a failure of the school. It means that if your child can go away, be exposed to something they've never been exposed to before, and then come back to you and ask you about it, it means you have a healthy relationship. Hopefully, you either know how to have that conversation with them and can answer that, or you know how to connect them with someone who can help them.
Right.
But it's okay if they don't have 100% of all of the doctrinal and theological and cultural things figured out by the time they're 18 or, May 15th when they graduate high. Like, it's okay. Their process is still continuing. Keep the relationship open. Also, make sure you're connecting them, though, with other men and women that are godly, so that they have a wealth to draw from, and not just from you. Not because you're not enough, but because you're not enough.
Right.
It's true.
I'm not enough for my kids. I can't do it all. I need them to be with other people. And they will ask other people questions that they don't ask me.
Right.
It is not because the door's not open. To me. It is not because they don't have a good relationship with me. It is because they love other people and they want to have those conversations with other people too. Thankfully, I have a good relationship with those people, so the conversations all get back. But I also have a good relationship with my kids. So even if they go and I had to ask Ryan about the Holy Spirit and he talked to me about, I have that conversation then with my child that still goes on. So it's ongoing. If you want your child to be missional, if you want them to run into questions and know how to have the answers, that's okay. It doesn't have to occur. Like Tony said, it's a spectrum. It doesn't have to be right there at 18. They have to be well equipped to handle everything that they're ever going to handle.
That's why doctors say that their brains aren't even fully formed at 25.
Right.
Yeah.
Bless their hearts.
I'm curious to ask you, David. We've kind of covered this well. I think you guys have spoken to the importance of parents' role in this, which is obviously what we're here for. Obviously, this question shades towards the idea of our school, though, so we don't want to shy away from that. Mm-hmm. And I'm just curious, David, what you would respond to. What are some of the ways that through our school we're looking to build and prepare our kids to be missional? Because I think sometimes not everybody sees those elements. When you're not there every day, you miss some of that. So can you just speak to that a little bit of how we're fostering that in our school?
To be honest, I think we're growing in it.
Okay.
I think we've recognized that that's an important piece. And so one of the things that we've done is, like in the high school, we've increased the Bible classes as a way of preparing them to have more understanding, to be able to answer questions. Like even in your classes, we gave you room to ask questions and for them to ask questions and to find answers. Because as they're curious, if they don't feel like they can ask the questions and get the answers, then they're less likely to go out and be missional, because they're not going to know that they can come back and ask you, well, I heard this. How does this fit with what we believe? How does that fit with what we believe? So creating a place in the school where kids feel comfortable, especially in the high school, that they can ask the hard questions. Because sometimes, and this isn't bad, but it is true. Sometimes at home, they haven't developed that relationship well enough to ask some of those questions.
Sure.
because those parents are still growing because they're new to the church, or they're new to this, or they're new to that. And so as long as we're feeding that back to parents at times, it can be a helpful place for them to do that. The other thing is we're starting young and starting to teach our kids to look beyond themselves, recognizing things like firefighters and policemen and ambulance district, and serving at a nursing home, singing to the kids, collecting food for the community. Those are all beginning ways to be missional too, because they're seeing beyond just what's right here at school or at home. I mean, our kids did a phenomenal job. They raised almost 500 cans of food for the community in a week.
Yeah.
And it involved not just the kids. It was fun because adults got involved. Families, grandmas, grandpas, all of those things are a part of teaching our kids to be missional because they see it on multiple levels in multiple ways.
Right.
So
one of the things also, I think, for the school, which I really appreciate, is that the biblical worldview foundation that we've brought into the school.
Sure.
We had done it with the high school at the upper levels to have a class on biblical worldview. And now we're bringing a curriculum like that into the lower levels also to start it sooner. But it's like I've not seen hardly any curriculum that works better to address culture and the things that are going on with culture and the questions that are out there about that, and how do we address this? How do we say this? What does this mean? You know, the biblical worldview foundation really helps that process in terms of, because it actually has even at times like role playing in terms of like, so if you have this gay friend at school at college that you met, you know, how would you start a conversation with them? It's like, well, the biblical worldview is one of the best ways, I think, in terms of training you to ask questions and getting the conversations and develop that way. So
yeah, I mean, even some of that curriculum, I've had the privilege of teaching to elementary students last year, and you know, it starts in Genesis, but it's not just your typical, oh, we're going to learn the stories kind of thing. It builds up to like, this is what the gospel's about. This is how you present the gospel. I mean, those things are foundational to knowing how to proclaim Jesus in the earth. I think the big takeaway I'm hearing on this piece of this conversation is, I don't think you as a parent can function on your own to foster this, but the school by itself cannot function to foster this either. It is a tandem. It is a working together of these things. And I think in the midst of that, an important for us to realize is we're called to preach the kingdom. We're called to live a kingdom life. We're not just called to the church. We are called to live kingdom lifestyles. Now, the vehicle of that kingdom is the church, and that's why we're talking about all these things. But I think if I'm looking at the school and what we do as a body is when we preach the kingdom, that is going to make us missional. That keeps us focused on those areas and growing in those ways. Guys, I really appreciate all these answers. I know we're right up here on time, but does anybody want to add any closing thoughts here? All right. Well, thanks for listening. We'll be back with another episode next week.